Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm honored and excited to have on Lindsay Kolasa. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mason.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
We've known each other, I would say, for damn well a decade, if not
Yeah.
more. And this is our actual first conversation, so I'm excited to delve into a little bit more about your story. I've long known about your work, but why don't we kick things off? We do this with a lot of the Herbalist Hours. We get to know the herbalist more. So how did you get into this whole herbal thing in the first place?
Yeah, the herbal thing. Yeah, well, it was a really big health crisis. And I was in Peace Corps in Ukraine. I was raised mostly in Mississippi and had somehow ended up in Ukraine with Peace Corps. And and I experienced psychosis. And it was about 13 months into my service. And then I returned to the States and then went back to the Czech Republic, and actually not back, but I went back to Eastern Europe, and I went to Prague to live because I felt I could have more interaction and more of a social circle than I did in Peace Corps. And so, and then upon going back to the States, I was still dealing with all the symptoms. And I went to a doctor in the States and I went to a doctor in the Czech Republic, and they gave me their very different ideas on ways to deal with all the symptoms, because there was the psychosis, but then there were a number of physiological things happening, from heart palpitations, dizzy spells, major GI issues, insomnia, intrusive thoughts, acute anxiety and depression. I mean, just the whole list of things. And a doctor in Mississippi wanted me to get on birth control. That was his response. And the doctor in Czech Republic wanted me to drink more green tea. So,
Oh, wow.
very gentle and benign, but not really going to do it.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to San Francisco after being in Prague, I was in a permaculture course that was city funded. And one of the presenters, you probably know him. He's an herbalist, Joshua Muscat.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He was one of the teachers, and then I went to him as a client, and he started helping me, and then I got my sea legs, and then I was able to chart a course out of the hole that had been dug for me, and so herbalism just became a part of my life. And then it started extending to friends, and then it started extending to the community, and then it started extending to strangers. And so then an herbalism practice arose out of that.
Okay. I would love for you to define what psychosis technically is. And also, before you get into that, if you're willing to share, I want to say I heard on that YouTube channel that we were talking about, Vanessa Smith, I want to say that you shared that it was brought about by using cannabis. I don't know if you want to go into that a little bit, but I'm very curious what psychosis technically is and how that came about.
Yeah, I'm 24 years later. I'm still pondering exactly the mechanics, but I have an understanding. So first of all, psychosis is the kind of the scientific definition is a disconnect with reality and someone having hallucinations, which I think is a very surface description, of course, as you can imagine. For me, it's a soul integration experience. So when I basically, it was traumas, both, from my childhood and environmental traumas that led me to the moment. And cannabis was the thing that opened the floodgates. And so, and I have a couple ideas of why that is. But for me, I took a subterranean dive into the subconscious, and that's where I lived for, I don't know, I want to say a good 2 to 4 years, to varying degrees. And then as I became integrating myself and integrating so psychosis is when the soul fragments from a trauma and you are now in the task of integrating that trauma. So you can't live your life unaware of that trauma anymore. You are actually in the midst of that integration process, and there's no way out. There's only integration. So then that's what psychosis is. And of course, that's why people are said to have these hallucinatory thoughts or hallucinations and these ideas that don't connect with the reality of where they are at the time. It's because everything is metaphor, everything is symbolism. If you think about dreams, that's the landscape of dreams, right? People wake up from a dream and they're like, oh, that's not reality. Yeah. And for the soul, it's 100% reality. And for a soul that's integrating itself, that's 100% reality. So when I was in that experience, there was something in me that later I found out there's a term for it. It's called a neutral observer. And there was, maybe it was, I don't know, and maybe that was fortified because I started getting into meditation, but there was a part of me that arose that was able to watch what was happening and understand that it wasn't the reality that I knew. And yet everything was just as real. And I knew kind of how to discern, what everybody else was seeing and what I was experiencing or hearing or feeling or sensing about a situation. So it's a deep dive. It's a deep dive into the subconscious, and the task is to integrate. And that's what a trauma does, is it splinters a part of the soul. And so that soul integration needs to happen, or it can lead a person into deep addiction, a deep addiction pattern. It can lead someone into acute anxiety. It can lead someone into a constant, persistent mental health state, something that would be classified as a mental health issue. So, or someone can continue reenacting the trauma. Mm-hmm. So those are all, possible outcomes when integration doesn't happen again.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. I like how you said that the surface level description of it, people might describe it as hallucinations. I'm actually colorblind, and a lot of times people will be like, oh, so you see in black and white. And I'm like, well, that's not really what that means. So it's hard to describe if you're not actually going through it. If you're not actually colorblind, it's hard to describe how I see the world. But
wow.
So I too have had a lot of trauma especially in my early years, and I had a very interesting relationship with cannabis early on, and I think that I was quote unquote addicted to it in my late teens, and but I realized later on I never really enjoyed it. I was almost doing it more to fit in, and right. It got to the point where I was no longer able to smoke weed because it gave me so much anxiety. And to this day, I even have tried just pure, like, say, CBD versus THC. And just the mere, like, smoking a CBD joint, just that callback alone, even though it's not getting me high, it still gives me, like, this anxiety. So I just have to stay away from it completely. Yeah. I'm curious if I'll ever get to the point of healing to where I could actually try it again. So that's all in a roundabout way to say, I suppose you're not using cannabis in your practice or on yourself.
No. And, there are, as they say, the little teachers and there's the big teachers. And don't get me wrong, the little teachers are still really powerful. Mm-hmm. I think like reishi and skullcap. Yeah. I mean, there are some deep work that they're doing, but the big teachers, those are they're called psychedelics, or, the ones that can cause hallucinations. Those are the big teachers.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes the big teachers are done with us too.
Sure.
So, I think mine was a very acute scenario. It's like, you're in, you're out. This is what we
Yeah.
have for you.
Sure.
But yeah, I can see that also being maybe its own message to you. It's like your body's saying, I don't need this anymore. So,
Totally.
and at the same time, I've thought, because you asked about this, the link between psychosis and marijuana. I remember, and I still am trying to find this study, but I remember reading this study that was based in the UK, and they had legalized marijuana, and the age was pretty young,
Hmm.
and they were noticing like really high incidence of psychosis. And they had also linked that people who had a gluten intolerance or, and a gluten sensitivity or even celiac, they were the ones prone to psychosis. So, because I do know that gluten already creates a big gap, a widening of the junctures of the tissues in the GI. And in Ayurveda, that's what marijuana does.
Yeah.
All the tissues of the body, it can open up.
Wow.
It's like it really does make everything so permeable. So I think one idea that I have is that it made my body hyperpermeable, and I had some, I don't know if it was heavy metals or some kind of toxic body burden, or even body manufactured chemicals that were a body burden and stored somewhere. And maybe those floodgates opened it up and it was just coursing through my body. And I had to sift through all that and deal with all that material, but in a very acute setting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one idea I have. And of course, I think that still parallels and relates to a psycho-spiritual aspect of cannabis, that that it is used by some traditions as a way to integrate, to do soul work, just like mushrooms are, and just like ayahuasca and all those big teachers. So,
Yeah. Strangely, I've never had issues with psilocybin. I've always found it to be a great teacher for me. Never tried the ayahuasca. Definitely terrified of that one, but maybe someday. But how are you doing these days? Do you feel like you've healed?
yeah, I'm to a good point. I mean, for me, life is the healing journey, so
Sure.
my work is throughout life. And but I'm at a good place. When I
Mm-hmm.
was going through psychosis, I had a lot of nightmares. And once I started taking herbs and changing my diet and moving my body and meditating, those nightmares turned into healing dreams.
Yeah.
And so I started having these very massive, waking up, feeling them in my body, deep imprint on my body type dreams. And I knew I was headed in the right direction with what I was doing. And so I don't have those nightmares, I rarely feel any anxiety. And if I do, it's giving me a very clear signal about something in the environment
Mm.
or some situation that I'm in. But it's not like I'm living every day with anxiety unchecked, So yeah, I feel great. I feel healthy, knock on wood. I'm feeling great.
That's fantastic to hear.
Mhm.
I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say, dear listener, do your own research on various substances if you're going to be, using these heroic doses of these highly medicinal plants. So we're not out here prescribing you try cannabis or psilocybin or any of the above. I just want to say that. It probably goes without saying, but maybe covering my ass, etc. But the other thing I want to say while we're on the topic is you have so many great ideas, Lindsay, and you're such a fantastic writer. I want to point the listener into the direction of following you on LinkedIn. You have a really great LinkedIn. I'm not sure if there's other social media that you want to plug and promote, but definitely also the newsletter as well, which you could find and sign up for Lindsay's newsletter at lindsaykolasa.com. I'll leave a link to that in the podcast show notes, YouTube description, etc. And that's Lindsay with an A. She's not one of those E Lindsays, right? So
Hey, Lindsay, that's right.
you're an A Lindsay. kind of sticking on the psychosis topic, I suppose, were there any particular plant allies that looks like Lydia says thank you for the link. And big shout out and thanks to HerbRally Schoolhouse member Lydia for joining us on the live stream today. Were there any like plant allies that you worked with to help you through your journey? Or I guess another way to phrase it, how have plants helped you heal along the way?
Oh gosh, so many. But, my first herbal formula really was a brilliant combination. So a nod, a deep bow to Joshua Muscat, and it was passion flower and hawthorn.
Oh, nice.
And it basically got me my foot in the door of getting some sleep. And so my sleep started to get better, and I was able to just do more and more and more. And he really did a great job of holding space and hearing me, and then giving me the medicine I needed. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for the medicine I needed. And what's so beautiful about passion flower is that it's native to Mississippi, and yet it's a plant that I'd never seen growing up. So that breaks my heart when I found that out. It was at the Santa Cruz Farm School, the one associated with the university, that's kind of legendary in its own right, that I saw passion flower growing. And I asked my friend, I said, what is this flower? And she goes, oh, it's passion flower. And she goes, you can eat the flowers. And I remember I just took a flower off the shrub, the vine, and I put it in my mouth, the whole thing, and I just chewed on it. And then within a week, it was tattooed on my shoulder. And
Wow.
I've never thought of a tattoo, but I'm like, this is my gal right here.
That's amazing.
And I had been taking it as medicine and never had seen it. So, and then, of course, later I moved back to Mississippi in 2012 and opened up an apothecary. And I'm out in the woods all the time. I grew her at my house, but I see her, I saw her climbing up the pine tree, and I would see her everywhere, and wondered how in the world I could have missed her all those years. And I was out playing all the time, but I guess nobody in my little small town neighborhood in Mississippi had a passion flower growing. And now I recently saw my mom tag me, because while I was there in Mississippi for 5 years, I was writing for Catfish Alley, which is a beloved magazine, no longer in existence, and just writing and teaching and collaborating with people, going to garden clubs all around the state. It was such a fun time, and I worked my tushy off. But I saw that, I think it was an extension office that had a whole newsletter on passion flower and encouraging people to plant them. And I'm like, woo, how great is that? So, yeah, hopefully it'll be more of a presence in the state again.
I remember the first time I saw it blooming in Oregon. I can't imagine it's actually native in Oregon, but I was riding my bike along the bike path, and I had to brake really quick, and I looked over and I was like, holy shit, what is this beautiful being? I couldn't believe how insanely beautiful it was. And that's so cool that you ended up developing a relationship with it. A week later, you're going to get tattooed on your body. Man, that's such a cool story. Please.
Just want to say it is so good for people. As you know, so many people talk about this lovely plant, but circular thinking, anxiety, it is an anxiolytic. It does help with certain forms of insomnia. It's such a great hypnotic nervine. And it's so interesting because there's a guy, Gideon Linscomb, who was an early botanical medical practitioner in Columbus, Mississippi, just down the road from where I was raised, 45 minutes away. And the guy who runs Catfish Alley said, you need to read this book about Gideon Linscomb. So I did, and he was taught by some of the Chickasaw, and he put out a shingle, and he was practicing in Columbus. So the interesting thing about his write-up on passion flower is that he didn't say anything about it being a nervine, and didn't use the aerial portion. He was focused on the root, and he was using it for pathogens, venereal diseases, things like that. And this was a whole other side to passion flower that I didn't even know of. And so then, there's this whole aspect of passion flower that I think even in the herbalist community, we're limited in our understanding. Even though we have plenty of people using the aerial portion and playing around with the maypops and the fruits and getting some good antioxidants and vitamin C's from the fruits. But I think there's so much there's so much more to that plant, and pretty much every plant. It's
Sure.
like a lot of times we're just skimming the surface. So, but that was a good realization for me, how much more there is to the plants, and yeah, and how much the tribes are carrying with their knowledge of these native plants. It's really so rich and so deep.
Are you able to share that link with us for that book by Gideon? Is it still in
Yeah,
print? Yeah.
oh, definitely.
Yeah. That'd be
Do you want
great.
me to do it right now or?
Oh, we could get it afterwards. That's all
Okay,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, we'll leave a link to that book in the podcast show notes. Um, well, let's get woo-woo here for a second. So one of the plants that I think about for circular thoughts, this is way it was taught to me by Howie Brownstein at the Columbine School of Botanical Studies, is skullcap, Scutellaria. And it's interesting that we're drawn to certain plants. And even though, like I said, on my bike ride when I was younger, I saw the passion flower and was drawn to its beauty. But even, all my years in this whole herbalism field, I've never really been drawn to passion flowers, like as far as taking it medicinally, even though everything we talk about, the indications for it, I'm like, oh, that sounds like something I should be using, however, or utilizing in my self-care routine. I'm drawn to various other calming nervines for whatever reason. I'm just kind of curious, why do you think that is? Why do you think that you were so drawn to passion flower? Why do you think it fits you and your body type, if you will, so well? And why is someone like me not drawn to it? Do you think I should still try it, throw it in my practice? Just kind of roll with that.
Well, personally, I think everybody should have passion flower.
Okay.
But
When in doubt, use passion flower.
I think one of the bits of medicine about passion flower, and people can tell just by seeing the flowers, is that there is a return to innocence, and that means there's a return to a sense of wonder that's been lost, and that could be from that is often due to a trauma. So I like working with it in that way too, because there's something beyond my understanding happening when someone interacts with this plant and takes it as a medicine. To me, it's so comforting when I feel the need to take it. So now the last time I've had to take it is when I had to drive from here to Mississippi, and I'm like, I need, I need something with me, and it really made the drive not only bearable, but it was just a really enjoyable trip. So I feel like in that way, I think that's just something very specific about that medicine. If someone needs help with that, seeing the world through fresh eyes, if that was taken from them too early, a lot of times, I find this to be really wonderful medicine for those kind of people. And yeah, I don't know why you're not taking it as a medicine, but when something's ready for you to be aware of it and partake of it, then it happens. So especially if you're open or looking, and skullcap seems very appropriate.
Sure. So, for me, to be selfish here, what would be my homework if I wanted to start utilizing it? Should I get a tincture bottle and take a few drops every day? How would you recommend I take it? Tea?
Well, I mean, if you get to be my student for this moment, I would say go and eat that flower first.
Okay.
Start there, and
Sure.
then see where it goes.
I'll probably get a tattoo within a week.
Yeah, I'll be like, "Hey, Mason, right shoulder, right shoulder."
That's right. We'll be
Uh,
twinsies.
yeah. But yeah, I think just start by eating the flower because I think that's a great way. Even if you just nibble on the leaf, eat the flower. There's so many cool things going on with that plant. You can check out the ants visiting the little
That's cool.
nectaries along the vine, and they're protecting the passion flower, and the carpenter bees are getting their little pollen bath.
Mm.
I mean, it is uh, really, I remember talking to a yoga teacher about this, and she was like, really, people just need to have them as goggles, like one on each
Mm.
eye, just like strap them over their eyes
That's
and walk
cool.
in the world. And I've never forgotten that because I was
That's
actually
cool.
late for class that day. And she was like, what happened? And I told her, I was like, I saw this passion flower and I was just hanging out with it for a little bit.
That's
And
good.
I mean, this is obviously before having children, right? I could just
Right.
kind of, oh, let me drift off into this world for a moment. And then I went to her class and she was asking me later why I was late. And she was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Blame the passion flower.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she was my accomplice. It was like we collaborated on that.
I like, and you said that was a yogini that was giving you that tip?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
It
like
was a
that.
yoga teacher that said that
Sweet.
should be on goggles.
That's
Everybody
so
should be
cool.
walking around. Yeah.
That's so
I'm like,
cool.
that would remedy a lot of things, if
Sure.
everybody had to look through like passion flower goggles.
That's right.
Yeah.
I
But
love
it's
that.
it's an amazing plant. It really is. And native to the southeast.
That's right.
And find it in Asia. In the UK, they obsess about it. There's a Passiflora Society and they've hybridized so many flowers. There's like things that probably would be even more mind-blowing because they're just, loving them so much and exploring all the potentials. But yeah, it's found in so many places, and so many people are using them medicinally. South America, Central America.
Hmm.
I know there's a particular species that has a fruit that my friend's family would eat in Brazil, and it makes you sleepy. Just
Oh, wow.
yeah, partaking of the fruit or drinking the fruit juice. And I can't remember what species that is, but it is a particular species. So they're going to behave a little bit differently. The ones you can find in Mexico, Guatemala, down to Brazil. So it's a fascinating plant. And I guess we're lucky just to be at the tip of its, of its geography to get a little bit here in the southeast. And then I guess the southwest has a native passion flower too.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, John Slattery has written about it.
Nice. He
Yeah.
was just on the podcast. Love that
Oh,
guy.
well, look at this.
Yeah.
It was like you're like Kevin Bacon and except
That's right.
Mason.
What is that? 7 degrees of separation from
Yes.
Mason? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
Hmm.
All right, so we got passion flower as a potential tool in the tool belt, for
Yes.
mental health. What other recommendations would you have for maybe your clients that you see as an herbalist if they're going through a mental health crisis? Anything else? It sounds like sleep is incredibly important, but yeah, what you got?
Yeah, get sleep together and get your digestive function together. So,
Hmm.
so many of the mental health issues, well, and also get your thyroid tested.
Oh,
So many of the mental health, especially some of the acute ones, are become because of a deficiency in the thyroid. So, get your thyroid checked. Make sure that your levels are where they need to be because that absolutely can be an issue for someone with acute depression or even schizophrenia. So, as well, you want to make sure that your GI is functioning properly. If you're having issues with bowel movements, or your stomach hurts, or you're having something in your lower abdomen is hurting, absolutely. Or if you're having reactions to foods, you really need to remove certain foods, heal that the gut, work on making sure that your gut is assimilating nutrients properly. And you can do that through different dietary protocols. You need to just rule that out before you do anything. Because if you start taking a medication, it's just going to mask all of that. So they're all going to work on neurotransmitters, which should be supplied by the digestive system and its relationship with the brain. So, you really need to make sure that your digestion is going excellent, and then you can figure out if there's something more going on. So, it's interesting. Before I even knew about leaky gut or any of that kind of stuff, in my state of psychosis, I remember feeling like my lower abdomen had a big hole in it, and that it was just like permeable, and that anything could get in and out in the world, and I had no barrier, I had no protection. That's what it felt like. And I felt like, now that I'm looking back, I think about I didn't know what leaky gut was. I didn't know what that was, but absolutely that's one of the issues that I had. And so thankfully, one of the first things I did was I started on a revised Atkins diet, which now I would do things differently. I mean, I would tell someone, look, vegetables, boiled meats, broths. If you don't have a histamine issue, then bone broths are fine. Otherwise, use a vegetable broth that you add agar and some kind of glutamine or something so that it's mimicking the bone broth and you're getting the same repair to the enterocytes and the lining of your digestive system. But you really, really have to focus on that. Make sure the thyroid's good. Make sure your digestive system is working properly. And invariably, you will start sleeping better. And once you start sleeping better, then your body is actually able to recalibrate, and you can enter the day refreshed and recalibrated and integrated. And so, I mean, those pieces really have to be dealt with. And, there's also, there's such a broad spectrum of mental health. And just broadly speaking, there also can be a there's situational depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's situational anxiety. You're in the wrong place. You're in a life situation that, is limiting you. So, I mean, those kind of things, herbs can also help, just at least to help someone with the symptoms that are arising in the moment. But ultimately, it will be getting yourself in a new situation or shifting something in your life to where things can ease up in your body and in your spirit and in your soul. So yeah, I feel herbs have such an amazing way of creating the stairway and creating the path for you to follow to make your way through something and out of something. And that was actually the message I had when I was in the depths of despair. And the message was, the only way is through. Mm-hmm. And it honestly is the only way. You have to make your way through it. And I think herbs are such good allies to help you be able to have the strength and the courage to make your way through that very difficult material. I remember seeing, and I wish I could find this too. I remember watching this interview, and it was this sounds so terrible because it's so general, but it was some tribe, a traditional tribe in Africa. And when someone is to become a medicine person in that community, they look for someone who's gone through psychosis, and they're taken under the wing of someone, and immediately they start pouring certain herbs into that person. And that's part of their training and that's part of their healing. And I'm like, well, of course, that makes so much sense, because herbs inherently are anti-inflammatory. Whether they're broadly to the body or to a particular tissue, they are going to bring inflammation down. And I think part of psychosis is like it could be a thyroid storm. It could be a cytokine storm. It could be just, an overriding systemic inflammation. But there are these, the body is just going haywire. So when I saw that and I thought about my own journey, I'm like, well, that's what I did. I just started pouring herbs into me, drinking infusions, taking my passion flower and hawthorn, and my formula did change over time. But, I was on herbs for, I don't know, I felt like 4 years straight. And they're still very much a part of my life, of course. And then using them for, acute situations, and then using them in moments where I need some support. So anyway, I thought that was just brilliant to hear that because
Yes.
I felt like I knew what they were doing. They were bringing down all the messaging in that person's body, the chemical messaging, and getting them to a place where they could be trained and they could prepare themselves. Because I do feel like the people who go through psychosis, they're already, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some disposition to sensitivity, whether that's a genetic trait or it's an epigenetic display of the genes. I'm not quite sure, but they have found like a number of genes associated with degrees of sensitivity. So I think, it makes sense in these traditional cultures that those would be the ones if something was out of kilter or off balance in a culture and someone went through psychosis, they would say, okay, something's out of balance. This person can help us restore balance because, they've lived the experience, they had the visions and the sights, they can help us get back on track. And they knew that that person is also sensitive to whatever the community is experiencing, but it's going to be that one person, right? The canary in the coal mine type thing. It's going to be that one person that experiences the full-blown effects of whatever imbalance is going on.
You mentioned epigenetics. I know part of your work in the clinic as an herbalist is helping folks with their lineage. I want to say I read that on
Yeah.
your website.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're referring to when you're helping folks with their epigenetics?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't do it very scientifically, but I do love to geek out and read epigenetic literature. But when I'm working with someone, I am looking at. I always want to know what's going on with their father's lineage and their mother's lineage. And just when I'm working with someone, I just need to know that.
Yeah.
And more times than not, it could be just because of my practice and who I am. These kind of people find me. But,
Yeah.
more times than not, there is a lineage repair situation that's presenting itself. Because I've worked with a lot of folks with autoimmune conditions, folks with thyroid conditions, and it happens to be mostly women.
Sure.
And these no one's ever had them look at, first of all, their childhood, and then second of all, what's flowing down their lineages. A lot of times families are, in survival mode and they're moving so fast, no one's passed down the stories, and we don't have extended families holding pieces of the stories to tell us. And so, as soon as I can get people aware of lineage-based healing, I like to make sure they're aware of that so they can start asking the questions before people are gone. And I bet sometimes it can still come up in a lost letter or a journal note or a friend of the family or even a dream, or even just a hunch. But it is fascinating to me how often things line up, and then also seeing clients take their health and their healing process into their own hands, because I'm trying to give them tools.
Right.
And then they can see in their everyday life, they're like, oh, wow, yeah, of course that would have impacted me, and our family hasn't dealt with that, and I just hadn't even thought of that. And conversations like that are common and need to be had. So it's very important work.
Absolutely. Yeah, you were talking about those types of folks are magnetized to you in your work. I'm like, shoot, I want to hit up Lindsay, see if she's got any openings in her clinic for me. What is your current practice like? Are you still accepting clients? Do you see folks on Zoom?
Yes, in Zoom, and if you're in the area, in person. And I mean, It's funny because my daughter was born in 2017 and then we moved and then COVID and we moved again. So pretty much I've met people online more and I've been
Right.
teaching a little bit more. Um, so yeah, so I'm meeting with clients. I think maybe it's just how the universe is working. I've been taking more short sessions because those are seed sessions. They're different than my root session, which is a longer period of time and allows us to talk a little bit deeper.
Okay.
But maybe it's just how the universe is working. But I've had more of these shorter sessions, mostly because there's been a lot more coming up with acute illnesses with COVID and with all these pathogens flying around. And but I have had some good root sessions as well. But it used to be my practice before my daughter was born. It was root sessions all the time. There was a lot more of that going on. So it's interesting how things have shifted, and I'm not sure if it's just kind of just the universe understanding that I don't have as much bandwidth as I used
Sure.
to. And I take it really seriously. If I'm doing a root session with someone, I want to have the time and I want to have the bandwidth and I want to have the presence. So I homeschool my daughter, and that pretty much puts me at evenings and weekends with
Right.
people. So yeah, so it's worked out, but I have noticed more of the shorter sessions lately.
Sure. So if the listener does want to check out your consultations, your rates,
Mhm.
etc., they could go to lindsaykolasa.com/consultations, learn more there. So this has come up a couple times, your practice in Mississippi. And I
Mhm.
know you had a practice in Mississippi from 2012 to 2017.
Yeah.
Just curious if you want to go into that, how you found it interesting practicing in a small town in Mississippi versus now.
Yeah, I loved it. I'm from a small town, Louisville, which is spelled like Louisville,
Okay, I was gonna
except
say.
people say Louisville.
Sure.
And I want to say it right because, that's the only way anybody would understand that you're talking about their town in central eastern Mississippi. I'm seventh generation. That town, on my mom's side. I'm sixth generation New Orleans on my dad's side.
Cool.
And yeah, so all of my ancestors on my mom's side came from early colonies in Virginia and North Carolina and made their way to Mississippi one way or the other. Actually, my mom's side went the low route, and my mom's dad's side went through the mountains. So
Oh
it's
wow.
interesting uncovering those lineages. So I'm an insider outsider, really, because I wasn't born there and I moved back when I was 11. And I wanted to move back so I could have a relationship with that place on my terms. Like now that I had pretty much created my own birth canal and rebirthed myself. I wanted to be back in Mississippi on my terms, not on Mississippi's terms, but on my terms, in terms of the culture and the society, but on my terms, seeing the land in ways that I hadn't before and interacting with plants that I didn't know how to when I was growing up. So it really was an amazing experience, and I got to know all kinds of people that are healers and that work with the land and naturalists. And I got to spend time in Mississippi on the water and kayaks and going out on trails and just seeing it through these eyes that I didn't have before, and working with the plants and learning about traditional uses of plants. And it was at that time that I was introduced to Phyllis Light
Mm.
and started studying with her. And so then she um, opened up a door and opened up insights into Southern folk medicine and the land that went beyond, what I was learning out west with Joshua, and I studied with Adam Sellers at the
Mm.
Pacific School of Herbal Medicine. So it was neat just to be with someone who is in such a rooted tradition, meaning Phyllis, and who had studied with Tommy Bass, and Tommy Bass being part of this this lineage that was white, that was black, that was native. I mean, it had such deep roots in that area. So I just felt that it really connected me to the Southeast even more. And I just appreciated that. I was like, we have a tradition in the South. We have Appalachian folk medicine, we have Southern folk medicine. And it was at that time that I was understanding my grandmother, who's Melungeon and mixed. And Phyllis was the first one to use that word, Melungeon, and talking about her father. And then the more that I uncovered about my great-great-grandmother, I was like, oh my goodness, she wasn't Cherokee, she was Native and Cherokee. She was African, West African, likely, and she was a mix of like German and English. I'm like, and there's probably aspects of her lineage that I still don't understand fully, like and genetically, because Melungeons are such a curious blend of all of these early settlers and people who had been on ships and just kind of dumped on the land, whether they were Moorish folks or Turkish, or another area of Africa, or even natives from South America. So I mean, it's just it's a fascinating thing to think about these mixed people and the early colonists and how they were creating their own people, and surviving and sharing and the medicine of Southern folk medicine is really an expression of those Melungeon ways. And so I felt like being back in Mississippi and running the apothecary and meeting people and understanding my ancestry more. It was also very grounding and centering for me. So I just really, really appreciated that. And it made me appreciate the quirkiness of this small town that I was raised in. It's the edge of Southern Appalachia. If you look at a map, it's like those counties in Mississippi that are the very final edge of Southern Appalachia. And and that's where my family's been.
So would you drive from Mississippi to Alabama to study with Phyllis then?
Yeah. I would drive and stay with my cousin in Birmingham, and then I'd go up and stay with her. At the time, we would stay with her. She had bunk beds and stuff, so we'd have a whole weekend. And Phyllis is such a great storyteller. So she's got such a great understanding of the body and nutrition, and how she looks at nails and elbows and knees and heels, and how she's able to pinpoint deficiencies, and how she understands the constitution types and the energetics of plants. It was always just such an amazing weekend. I love being there, and it was always something that I look forward to. So I think she does more online these days and virtually, which is great, because if you don't live nearby, then you can be there with Phyllis. But I do miss that, the in-person and sitting in circle and tasting the herbs together and going out and looking at plants and going on plant walks. So it was a really great experience.
She's also got a great book. The title's eluding me. Is it Southern Folk Herbalism?
Exactly, Southern Folk Medicine. Yeah.
Southern Folk Medicine. We'll leave a link to that in the podcast show notes too. This might be putting you on the spot, but would you be able to distill or think of one particular piece of wisdom or life philosophy, or maybe related to herbalism, the way you see the world that Phyllis taught you?
Yeah, well, what I really loved about it, and these are things Tommy taught her, is to view the body like the forest and like a tree, and that the plants uptake the minerals, and they eat the rocks so that we can get the minerals from the rocks. So I've never forgotten that, and also how trees the sap in the trees and how it moves is like the blood, how the blood moves in our body. So in the winter, it's more towards our core. It's harder to get peripheral circulation. And there's reasons why we need certain herbs at certain times of year. And also how we get ourselves going in the spring. We need something to help move circulation, move the fats, and move things that were in our body during the more stagnant period. So I think just the lessons of viewing the body like a tree, and also in Southern folk medicine, the practice is that tree medicine is the most potent medicine because it's reaching its roots the deepest into the soil. So I ended up working a lot more with tree medicine, and it was largely because of that. So I really appreciated the nature-based awareness. Of course, there's Christianity and religion woven into that because, you know, you're in the South.
Yep.
And but that humility and the awareness of seasons, even, you know, Phyllis talked about seasoning and hardening. When someone is new to an area and their body has to acclimate to that new area. I think people move so much in modernity. People just think we're, you know, can be anywhere, anytime, and they don't realize that our bodies are really suited for the places our ancestors have been. And so she talked about seasoning, and some people don't make the seasoning in certain areas. Their bodies don't acclimate. And really, it is about getting yourself to a better place for your body and your constitution. So some of those concepts, which I thought were really in tune with not just trying to find an herb to remedy something, but you're looking at the person and their story, and you're looking at where they are, and you have an understanding of the seasonality there. You have awareness of the climate, and you have an awareness of the topography. And I just feel like in Southern folk medicine, there was such a broad scope of understanding, which of course is lacking in conventional medicine, but even in some areas of herbalism, I feel like it's lacking as well. So
Absolutely. You mentioned staying in place, and for some reason I was thinking of something I read from you. I want to say on LinkedIn that you took a hiatus from, I want to say, cell phones and movies and all that. Do you want to talk about that and maybe the benefits that you gained from that?
yeah, well, I mean, it started because I was in the mountains and there wasn't cell phone reception. And so then I'm like, well, maybe I don't need this thing. And so I would go down off the mountain. Of course, you know, I could have used a cell phone then, but I was like, I wonder if I can do this, you know? So I had a landline. And then when I moved off the mountain to Mississippi, I decided I would keep it going. So I had a landline in my house. I ran a business, and I still didn't have a cell phone. And it was great. And it was a meditation for me because I saw more and more of, I left San Francisco right when smartphones were coming around and people were buying them more. And then I started seeing them crop up everywhere. And you know, cell phones as well, but, you know, there were very few. Probably by 2016, I saw very few people with a flip phone or something like that. Everybody had transitioned over. So I thought it was an interesting pause for me because I could really watch the transition, and I can watch the transition in people and how they were behaving. And even visiting San Francisco years later, seeing how it was behaving so incredibly different. And, you know, everybody had a smartphone and nobody sat at bus stops anymore, you know, reading a book. You know, everybody was on their phone being hyper productive. So, so for me, it was a good meditation just to challenge myself in that way, and also to observe what was going on around me. And it was a personal challenge. It was just, you know, a challenge that I had for myself. And now I use just a simple Nokia, and, you know, I can call, I can do voice to text. So I'm like, okay, well, that'll be fine. I've never had a smartphone. My husband does have one. But you know, I don't, and I don't. I don't think I know what I'm missing. So then it's fine. Yeah.
And look at us. We're doing a Zoom interview right now. You're still able to function in society
Yeah.
and get
Yeah.
the
Look
work
at,
done you need to get done. You
got
don't
a
need the smartphone.
headset.
I do exactly. Look at you. You're fancy.
I know.
I do have a smartphone. I do think it'd be Amanda just started, requiring me to take 2 days off a week, which has been amazing. The past couple of weeks, I've actually taken
Yeah.
some time off, and it's so centering just to step away from the
Yeah.
computer and the work. And I think maybe just being inspired by you, maybe I'll do one of those days where I don't even allow myself to have my phone either. That would be taking it to another level. I think that'd be really
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It is really a fascinating experience. I think you'll enjoy, what emerges from that time.
Yeah.
I've never had something like that, so I don't even know to look at it for a tool. Like I said, I
Right.
don't know what I'm missing out on. I know my simple phone is not interesting at all. So, I
It's
think
boring.
it is, so I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I can text and it's kind of difficult to text. So I can really only talk to text without taking like a good 5 or 10 minutes to type something because I have to go through each letter.
Yeah. I
So,
remember
I mean,
those.
it's kind of like when I was at the meditation center, I did a lot with the Zen Center.
Hmm.
And, they have us doing walking meditation sometimes. And that walking meditation, you're just taking a step and you're feeling your heel down to the toe and you take the next step. And I remember I would almost like bump in front of the person in front of me at first. And I'm like, okay, let me just let me go like micro slow here. And I feel like that's what it is like going through these letters when I'm texting. It's like it's just gonna slow me down, and I need to be slowed
Cool.
down.
Yeah.
So I like that. I think I put the speed bumps in place for a reason for my personality.
Well, you're a very present person. I could feel that through this conversation, and it's probably through your many different practices that you have in your daily routine. And I just really appreciated this conversation. Do you have a few more minutes, Lindsay? We could
Mhm.
talk about a little bit about the integrating herbalism back into American society. Do you want to chat about that, or save it for a next episode?
Yeah, we can.
Awesome. So, Lindsay, how do we integrate herbalism back into American society?
How do we, Mason? Tell me.
No, you
I
tell
mean,
me. I'm
I
trying my
just
best over here, but
Oh, you're doing such a great job. Oh my
oh, thank
gosh.
you.
Well, I really, can you host a roundtable?
I would love to.
I
That's a cool
really want
idea.
this to be a discussion because,
That's a great
I
idea.
mean, we have that, I think we have a wound in our herbal community from the 1930s when we had the American Medical Association that formed and the suppression of botanical medical doctors. And we know how amazing these eclectic physicians were and the other botanical medical doctors practicing throughout the country. We can read their literature, their books like this. Henriette Kress has done a great job putting those online. But we have all these resources. We know how much understanding they have of vitalism, they were vitalists. They wanted to do no harm, and they wanted to use the least invasive medicine as possible as an intervention to help someone without whatever their symptoms or ailments were. And I what I want to see is that this vitalism and where we left off in the 1930s, we have to somehow. I mean, we are bringing it back. There have been so many trailblazers that have brought it back. Michael Moore, Rosemary Gladstar, David Hoffman. We've had all of these people just bringing things back. But I still feel like there's something in the herbalism community where we feel that wound, and it's almost like our language isn't good enough, like our view of the body isn't good enough, our kind of science is not good enough, and and I feel like that's a hindrance, and I feel like we can go back to that wound of when that community was the deplatformed and not viewed as valid, not put on the medical board, um, then I feel like we still have this overcompensation pattern happening in our herbal community based on that wounding and not being enough just as we are with our understanding of the body and the tools that we use. And I feel like something, I'm not sure what, but something has to shift there. And then somehow, I don't know, we have to get money out of medicine. We have to get money out of food. I don't know what will allow the integration to happen. Some ego massaging probably with the conventional medical community. But somehow, we have to start integrating these tools because I want them to be accessible to people. Or we have to build up our herbalism community enough where, herbalists feel supported, where herbalists are thriving, and where all kinds of people can access various herbalists in their region and feel cared for. So I don't know what it will take. I do think about this off and on all the time for years, and I'm eager to find some way to integrate. I mean, such knowledgeable, such amazing people. I mean, this practice, this herbalism, was instrumental in saving my life.
Yeah.
So I feel so grateful that Michael Moore taught a slew of people, and one of them being the person that I was lucky enough to meet to get me on the right track, so that I wasn't floundering through the medical system anymore. So, I want to know how to better the situation and have more people be able to access herbalists, but also trusts, herbalists. Like herbalists are extremely capable. So, I'm curious how. Let me know if you have ideas.
It's really an interesting question. And I love your roundtable idea. You could feel free to throw out a few names if you think would be great on the roundtable, including yourself. We could talk off air about it, but I would love to organize that. Recently, within the past month or so, someone here in town said, "Why do you like plants so much, Mason?" And I was like, "That is such a weird question. Like, what? Like, I couldn't barely respond. I mean, I eventually said something to him, but I thought that was such a weird, odd thing, and it kind of speaks to what we're talking about here right now. But
yeah. Like if you ask a fish, why do you like water? It's like, exactly. I need it. Or if you look at any of those ethnobotanical resources for all of these indigenous communities, it is astounding the hundreds upon hundreds of plant relationships that were had.
Right.
And we have that botanical illiteracy.
Yeah.
So, I think it's very offensive to plants that we are that illiterate. They feel lonely and they want us to connect with them. So, I just appreciate all that you're doing and the many folks in the herbalist community that are helping people make those connections and make those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're doing our part at HerbRally just by me and Amanda being our true selves and not being afraid of judgment. I spent so many years just afraid of what other people would think if I put myself out there in any way online, or in other words, just being my true Mason self. And I feel like I'm doing my part in the sense of speaking for the plants, and just by hosting a podcast or a website dedicated to herbalism and not letting that fear take over. So I guess that's all I could say from my point of view, is just, if you feel called to do this work, get out there and do it, and don't care what other people think, and just do your best. And you know what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, I mean, I think about the archetype of the sacred fool, the one who just gets out there and just knows you have to begin, you have to start, you have to try. and not not letting, there's no judgment or criticism. There's just this sense of curiosity and openness. Like, okay, well, I'll just put myself out here, just bare naked and just be vulnerable and put myself out there and see what happens. So yeah, I appreciate that.
It's a lot of fun too. So life is certainly more enjoyable when you're creating this type of work. Lindsay, do you have any upcoming projects you'd like to promote, keeping in mind this might be published in a couple months?
Oh, goodness. Maybe by then I'm in the midst of a traditional food ways and kind of gut healing program with some people.
Nice.
But by then, maybe I'll have cooked something else up. So,
Okay, there you go.
just have people check the website and you can look at events. There's an events tab.
Cool. All right. LindsayKolasa.com. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining me on the Herbalist Hour. Once again, shout out and thank you to Lydia from the HerbRally Schoolhouse for joining us live as well. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up and get out of here?
Go nibble on something wild, folks. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I heard you also say in that YouTube video that you should try to eat 5% of your food wild every day. I
Yes.
remember saying that. And I love that. And actually, it's on my self-care checklist to even nibble on one little wild thing per day.
Yeah.
And earlier I had a little calendula leaf. So
Yeah. Even like one of those in the spring, those dandelion flowers. I mean, that's substantial.
it's good stuff.
Yeah.
It's good for the heart and soul. So
Yes.
once again, thanks to Lindsay Kolasa. That's lindsaykolasa.com. Sign up for her newsletter. Check her out on LinkedIn, all the other socials, if you will. And yeah, we'll see y'all in the next episode of the Herbalist Hour. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Thanks, Mason.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HerbRally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herballi.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HerbRally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herballi.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode and take care.